Good evening, friends. My name is Sharita, and welcome to the Connecting Grounds. I just want to come right now and kind of just open with a few words, a word of prayer and encouragement. I personally am physically tired, but I'm grateful for this wet, kind of gray day today. We've had a lot of very hot weather. I know that's challenging for some of us who spend more time outside, but whether you were inside or outside, it's been really, really hot recently. I also am just grateful to be back among our friends. It's been a few weeks since I've been able to be here with you all, so it's good to just be back in a place where I know that I'm loved, and hopefully you feel that love also. I have this little prayer that I want to open us with. It's called a prayer for the church, and I really like this prayer. It's from a book called A Collection of Meditations for Renewal, A Rhythm of Prayer. It's edited by Sarah Bessie. And I like this prayer in a way that sometimes we do here at the Connecting Grounds. The pronouns in this particular prayer to God change periodically, so you may hear that and notice that in this prayer. So I'm just going to open with this prayer, and if you would like to close your eyes, you can. If not, you can just listen to these words and meditate on them. And this is called a prayer to the church. Spirit of Jesus, come with fire that refines, water that refreshes, wind that topples, breath that fills. Kindle a global revival of empathy, justice, and active peacemaking. Birth a witness of love that is bigger and better than we inherited. Liberate us from privilege and oppression. Unshackle the gospel from nationalism, colonialism, white supremacy, and every other lens that shrouds the good news. Give us an abundance of grace for others and ourselves. Grant us compassion for those who suffer. Free us from the influence of money, power, and acclaim. Restore our reputation for caring for the poor, loving our neighbors, being ambassadors of peace and stewards of the earth. Unlock the immense resources hoarded in the Western Church and release them for your name's sake. Encourage us so that we do not grow cynical, isolated, and burnt out. Fan our hopes, our joys, and our connections. Allow us rest when we need rest. Enable us to see you in each person we encounter. Show us mercy in our humanity. Let us love more fully than we thought possible. Let us not be quick on the draw, ready to retaliate, escalate, and assassinate. Let our collective fervor for justice eclipse institutional concerns. Let us trust and follow the wisdom of those who have been marginalized. Let us persevere in creating safe spaces of worship to eat bread and drink wine together. Let us stand for love and with love, following the way of your own Son as best as we're able. Let us not fear an experiential spirituality. Let us listen to the wondrous bodies you gave us. Let us hear your voice and tangibly fill you with us. Let us discern your guidance. Let us abide in you and with you. Show us what you're doing so that we can work together. Move where you will, when you will, and whatever way you will. Come, Holy Spirit, and restore your church. Amen.
Thank you, Sharita. It's a quiet night around here. I feel like we're missing the majority of our TCG crew family, but those who are here, I'm so glad you're here tonight. I want to take a second and just honor Bob and Christy are not here tonight. They're driving to New York. Bob lost his mom this week. And so as a family, they've been able to go up so they can spend time mourning that loss together. And so I'm going to just take a second and just kind of honor that space for them. I know they're missing us and we're missing them, but I'm grateful they have that place, that opportunity to get to be together as a family. I don't know about you, but I've had a hard week. And the rain today has felt like a nice break from a really long season. So we're going to start with a song tonight. It's called God is in the Looking of Your Eyes. And I want to invite you into kind of a meditative place with us. I invite you to listen. If you would like to sing along, you are always welcome to do that. If you would like to close your eyes and just listen, you are welcome to do that. If you would like to get up and move around as you are able, you are welcome to do that.
Bluer than a cloudless April sky, hotter than the stars that scorch the night, twirling in the tear that you can't hide. God is in the looking of your eyes. Happy as a dog laying in the grass, written in a nation's violent past, empty as the time you try to pass. God is in the questions that you ask, sweeter than a blossom tangerine, crumbling like the breakers on a beach, different as the languages we speak. God is in the people that you meet, purest babies in their mother's arms, broken as the loneliest of hearts, deep within your soul, so torn apart. God is in the person that you are. Bluer than a cloudless April sky, hotter than the stars that scorch the night, twirling in the tear that you can't cry. God is in the looking of your eyes.
This next song, I invite you to enter a space with us. We always, our heart at TCG is that we believe that God loves everyone and that that love is not exclusive, that that love is affirming, and we recognize that everyone here may not believe the same way. We recognize here that everyone looks different, that their experiences are different, and we want to honor and welcome all of those spaces. This is a song that Alyssa and I have both cried to together. It's a song that means a lot to us, and I hope it's a song that you can connect with in some form, whatever that looks like. It's a song called, it was a mashup called Stupid Deep and Sinking Deep together. So I invite you to listen or sing along, whatever you feel comfortable with.
What if who I hope to be was always me, and the love I fought to feel was always free? What if all the things I've done just attempts at earning love? 'Cause the hole inside my heart is stupid deep, stupidly.
What if where I tried to go was always here? And the path I tried to cut was always clear. Why has life become a plan to put some money in my hands when the love I really need is stupid cheap? Stupid cheap.
I'm wide awake, drawing close, stirred by grace, and all my heart is yours. All fear removes, I breathe you in, I lean into your love.
Love so deep is washing over me. Your face is all I seek. You are my everything. Jesus Christ, you are my one desire. Lord, hear my only cry to know you all my life. Love so deep is washing over me. Your face is all I see. You are my everything.
What if all the things I've done just attempted earning love? Soul inside my heart, stupid, stupidly.
Friends, I'm going to switch it up for a minute. You get me tonight. If you know anything about me, I have like this weird disdain for those little microphones that we go on your ears. So I didn't even ask my husband if he could get that set up tonight. So he's probably rolling his eyes back there. So, oh my goodness, friends. I was not scheduled to share with you tonight. With everything Bob and Christy have going on, I kind of threw this together last minute, so I just really want to have a conversation with you because I think it's something that for my entire faith journey is something that has meant a lot to me, but it is something that has radically morphed over time. And so Christy last week started Psalms 119. So for those of you who haven't been here, we've been doing a whole year of Psalms. We've been just diving into the seasons of the Psalm. I am a lover of all things nature and all things seasonal, and it's been a really sweet connection with probably the most emotional and poetic book of the Bible. And so we've decided to break Psalms 119 down into like several different sessions because that psalm is huge. And so she did the first few verses, I think the first 8 verses last week. And as I just started to read through the psalm this week, there was one single verse that really connected with me. And so I'm going to read about 8 verses, and then I'm going to go back and kind of really focus on that one single verse, because while I am someone who has found in a season of doing a lot of unlearning what I was taught growing up, a season of reconnecting who I have learned God to be with a lot of the religious places like scripture that have been a little complicated for me. Sometimes it's a stanza, sometimes it's a whole chapter, sometimes it's a whole book that connects with me, and sometimes it's a single verse, and I think that's okay. And I'm going to read out of the Message translation. And so this is a beautiful translation. It's honestly one of my favorites to read because it is so different than anything I grew up with. Yet there is something so relatable to this translation. And I'm a firm believer that translations are one of the most creative ways to read the Bible, because I think the interpretation of the Bible, the individuals who put time into writing the Bible were writing in some regards in their interpretation, and that's the same thing with the different translations. So I want to go into the Message today. It's verses 25 through 32, and I'm just going to read it. It starts with, I'm feeling terrible. Anyone relate? Like, how authentic is that? I'm feeling terrible. I couldn't feel worse. Get me on my feet again. You promised, remember? When I told you my story, you responded. Train me well in your deep wisdom. Help me understand these things inside and out, so I can ponder your miracle wonders. My sad life's dilapidated, a falling down barn. Build me up again by your word. Barricade the road that goes nowhere. Grace me with your clear revelation. I choose the true road to somewhere. I post your road signs at every curve and corner. I grasp and cling to whatever you tell me. God, don't let me down. I'll run the course you lay out for me if you'll show me how. And the verse that really instantly connected with me, there's actually two that I highlighted that I really want to talk about. The one I really want to connect with is in that very first section, and it simply says, when I told my story, you responded. I grew up with this perception that the Bible was full of these stories that talked about people who had this massive amount of influence. People who felt really out of reach for me, like I was just this simple, tiny little nobody, and here I'm reading about these big somebodies. And there was this massive disconnect of trying to understand what made these individuals so special, that they become so many incredible figures that have been talked about on countries for generations all over our world. And as I've done a lot of digging, I love hearing people's stories. I know I have a pretty crazy story, and I love to share mine. If you're willing to listen, I'll sit down and share that piece with you. I think one of my favorite things about the Bible is that, which is actually funny because it's the thing that I really struggled with growing up, is that the Bible connects us to real emotions, and the Bible connects us to real human experiences. The Bible is actually a collection of really, really messy stories. And if you've read the Bible and you allow yourself to look at it with that perspective, I mean, even Jesus, like, for example, I think one of my favorite stories in the Bible is when Jesus is like a younger, I guess it was at the very start of his ministry, so he was the younger version of himself during his ministry era, and his mom, he's at a wedding, and his mom was like, Jesus, they ran out of wine, like, do something about this, like, the crisis, right? Like, something that seems so insignificant to many of us compared to the cooler things Jesus did later on. And like, when Jesus responds, it's almost very teenagery, like, it's like, really, Mom? Like, come on now. And he does it. Like, he turns water into wine. And as I've gotten older, I appreciate that story so much more because it is so human. Like, it is so human. They were celebrating and they didn't want to stop celebrating. And so Jesus made that happen. Like, and he did it kind of like snarky. And I love that. I love the story of when Jesus walked into the temple and he saw the tables, and instead of preaching and pointing fingers and shaming, he freaking turned those tables over. Like, he lived with righteous anger. He lived with emotions that are so relatable to us as human beings, and yet we often kind of shame those emotions. And yet here Jesus is turning tables over in a temple setting, like the most sacred place for him to be at. How cool. Like, another one of my favorite stories is when they're on a boat in the middle of the lake, and this lake is not a small lake, it's massive. I love to look at maps because these humans in Bible times, they saw this lake as this enormous ocean. And when you compare it to what we know now, we're like, that was nothing. But to them, this was massive. The waves on these seas were huge, and the storms were detrimental. And this was during an era where you would go out to sea, and if you died, nobody knew you died until you just didn't come home. And so they're out on this boat, and the storm starts, and Jesus is napping. Again, how human. Like, Jesus was sleeping. He needed to get some rest. And I've learned to love that story because there's a lot of times I struggle personally to take a break. I know Sharita will advocate for that I struggle to stop. And there's been people in my life that have been like, Jesus took a nap. Come on, Holly. Who do you think you are? Okay, I can nap. I am enjoying a season of my own mothering experience. If you all saw my sweet preschooler and toddler running around the building earlier, we were given a Bible for my kids a while ago, and my daughter has really been into the Bible stories lately, and she wants to bring me her Bible, and we've been reading them before bed. And this Bible tells the stories in the most humorous ways, and I'm really appreciating it. And we sat down and we read the story of Jonah together the other night, and we just giggled. Grown man throws a temper tantrum, gets on a boat to go the other way, realizes the storm is his fault. I don't know what he was thinking, but he's like, throw me in these scary waves. Maybe a shark will eat me. Well, not a shark, but a big fish, and you're gonna live in his belly for 3 days. My daughter was bent over hysterically laughing. And I saw this world through her eyes, and I became so appreciative of that because I think I spent so much time fearing the God that would create a storm that would make the humankind throw one another overseas, and then the God that is a rescuer who then keeps a man alive in a fish's mouth for 3 days. And instead, I'm sitting here laughing with my daughter because I can relate to Jonah, and I can relate to those men on the boat, and I can relate to that fish. Sometimes I'm really, really hungry. That fish was probably ooh, great snack here. And then he had a bellyache for a few days. But we read, actually last night, we read the story of Zacchaeus, and this Bible showed him as this very teeny tiny man who, when he talks to Jesus, he has to stand on a stepladder. And again, my daughter was just laughing and was just appreciating this story that, again, I put so much, that instilled a lot of fear in me and a lot of just intense emotions. And instead, I'm just reading the stories of other humans just like me. Humans who felt fear, humans who made mistakes and then were bullied and not liked by their humankind brothers and sisters, but who just craved community. Other humans who did stupid things, who did silly things, who wrote crazy poems like the entire book of Psalms that's just emotional and all over the place. And I love David for that because it gives me a lot of peace that my emotions are okay, the ups and downs and the mental health. There's not any other clearer picture of mental health in the Bible than the book of Psalms. Depression, anxiety, even maybe some bipolar thrown in there, those things have been around forever. And that's the humanity of the Bible that I think is so important that we so often miss, because those were the humans that God loved. And the humans that God saw value in including in our Bible. And I feel like we get so wrapped up in some of the details that, and whether there's truth and laws and what does this mean, right, wrong, black, white, instead of appreciating the consistency of God, that he has loved people for so long through mistakes, through mess, through silliness, through heartbreak, through immense amounts of grief and tragedy. God is the only consistent in the Bible, unless you measure the fact that humankind is we're crazy. And we're beautiful, and we're justice warriors, and we are survivors. And when I read the Bible now, I'm learning to see it through the eyes of one human who knows that I can never understand the way God loves me, but I can read these stories that were passed down for generations. So I don't know, when these stories were told verbally, how much some of the details may have been tweaked, but the reality doesn't matter when we see a God who loved, a God who redeemed, a God who protected, who fought for, who showed up time and time and time again, who then sent his son to come and live among us. Our stories, they are powerful, they are healing, and our stories connect us to one another in ways that almost nothing else can. I'm a huge fan of the Enneagram. Christy really got me into that, so blame her. I love to explore the different personality types because I tend to be someone that takes things really personally because I'm really sensitive, and it's really good for me to understand the way different people think and act and respond so that I can be in relationship with all sorts of people. And in doing so, there's a lot of times I may not be able to connect with you on the level of your personality and the things you do and the things maybe that are important to you. But if you and I sit down and we share stories, I promise there is a place where we can connect emotionally. I may not have been through the same things you have, but I can promise we have probably felt emotions similar to one another at some point in our lives. The entire Bible is a Bible of stories. Complicated, messy, crazy stories. Yet somewhere along the way, the modern church has kind of protected this religious space from hard stories. And I don't know about you, but I have been in religious circles where I felt like my story was too messy. I felt like there are pieces that I have to hide, and I can't talk about, pieces I felt ashamed of. And I look back to those younger versions of myself, and I just want to wrap her in my arms and be like, no piece of you is disgusting. No piece of you is too far gone, too messy, too complicated. You are not a mistake, and what you've been through does not deem you less valuable. And I think the purest place we get that affirmation is every single story in the Bible. When we tell our story, God responds. Let me give you a couple of examples. Our stories, they start protests that change the way our community and our world work. There is a story, or actually there is a lot of stories behind every single law that exists. Almost every single nonprofit, church, business organization is founded on a story. I love talking to people who've started something, because when you ask them why they started this organization, why they do this work, why, there's almost always something there that is incredibly inspiring. There's a reason doctors dedicate their lives to researching cancer. There's a reason that TCG exists. There's a reason Family Connection next door exists. That is part of my story that I fight for every day, that is an inspiration for me when I'm next door loving on the families that I get a chance to love on. Our stories, they inspire people, and they inspire change. I don't know about you, but in seasons that I have been in some of my darkest places, the most influential members to me in my life were people who got it. And they were people that were like, hey, Holly, I've been there. I've been through that. Or maybe I can't relate exactly to that, but I can relate to the emotions that you've been through. I can relate to the way that you're feeling right now. And I owe my life to a lot of those people who kept me floating, to people who, when I did not want to hear the name of God because I was so pissed off at him, they kept showing up for me, and they loved me the way that Jesus loved me until I realized that was God in them. I have been really, and I've shared this with you, I've been in a season of doing a lot of allowing myself to do a lot of reading and a lot of just research into other cultures, especially into indigenous and ancient populations, to honor what a lot of our modern world has eliminated and has harmed. And in most ancient cultures, there is something really beautiful that they do with humankind. In fact, in some cultures, you're not actually born with a name, or if you're born with a name, that's kind of just what is the placeholder. And at some point, there is a name given or a naming ceremony, and those things are usually given based off of your life. And I love meeting people, especially in the Native American community, when they've been given some of these names, And you ask them about it, and they're so proud to tell you the reasons behind it because it means something to them. I can tell you right now that our Springfield unsheltered community, there is a lot of nicknaming that happens, and there's a very similar, and I love that. I love understanding how those nicknames come to be. And then there's a lot of our friends who that shifts at some point, and I love hearing those stories because there's something really powerful to renaming yourself or being renamed based off of what you're going through. And I think sometimes we miss the picture of that a little bit. We put a lot of emphasis in our birth names, but like my baby sister just gave birth to a baby yesterday. Like, I'm so over the moon happy for them. But like, he's a cute little wiggly bundle of wrinkles, and like, no, we don't know who he is yet my sister and her husband gave him this beautiful name, but will that name really mean what it means later on? I don't know. I hope that the names we've given our kids are names that I'm not so attached to, that if they feel different, they feel like there's something that means more to them, that they can relate to more, that we can just celebrate that. Isn't that how we're supposed to be? At the end of this little section, there's a lot of text there, and I'm not going to get into that. But at the very end, it says, I'll run the course you lay out for me if you'll show me how. We are not born with this like knowledge of how to do things right. And it's not that we steer off course. Like, we have to figure it out as we go. And I don't really, in my experience, I have not really experienced God to show up to me and be like in a big, thunderous, booming voice with lightning striking down that's like, go here, make this decision. And like, I start to veer off course, and it's like, Holly Rose, like, come back. In my experience, I have learned so much about life and journey, and the decisions I've made have been based off of the stories of other people. People who've told me, I've walked down this path and I don't want you to experience some of those things I had to. Please don't do that. Or people who've said, you know what, I know this is really scary and I've been there, but I can tell you right now that it's the bravest and best thing I ever did. Telling our stories makes a difference. And I sit here in this room, and I know a lot of you. There are some of you I don't know very well. But I am amazed at the stories that are in here. And I'm amazed at the way those stories have shaped you. I'm amazed at the way you have survived. I'm amazed at the way that you have fought like hell to get to where you are. And I'm just amazed at who you've become. We're not all perfect, but our stories aren't done yet, right? I want to read a quote to you. This is a beautiful quote by Joy Harjo, who is a very, very, very popular poet. It says this: we are all here to serve each other. At some point, we have to understand that we do not need to carry a story that is unbearable. We can observe the story, which is mental, feel the story, which is physical, let the story go, which is emotional, then forgive the story, which is spiritual, after which we use the materials of it to build a house of knowledge for ourselves and for others. There is a lot of sacredness in the ancient art of storytelling, and I can promise you we all still do it today. We just don't make it as much of a sacred experience. But have you ever sat down with friends over coffee or over a campfire and just shared stories? There is something more spiritual about that space than sometimes sitting in a church building, hearing the heart, the grief, the bravery in another human. I can promise you that when you allow yourself to fully listen, you will see God. there's another quote that I kind of want to end with, and before I invite Alyssa back up here. It's a beautiful quote by a pastor. Her name is Nadia Bolz-Weber, and she's kind of a rebel, and I love that about her. She is a tattooed pastor who preaches and writes a lot of books, and she curses pretty much every other word, and she's just someone who has broken the glass ceiling in a really cool way, because she is so human as a pastor. It's something I'm really grateful for our community here with Christy. Like, there is probably not a person who comes to TCG in any context that doesn't get to know Christy, because she doesn't sit behind an office and she doesn't sit behind a desk. The activity of what I think these roles are supposed to be is active and relational and public, and very, very, very much the kind of ministry that Jesus led. But Nadia Bolz-Weber says, "But I cannot pretend, as much as I sometimes would like to, that I have not throughout my life experienced the redeeming, destabilizing love of a surprising God." I love that, because she's telling a story of her brokenness, and yet when she looks at, she's sitting in a room, and they were celebrating the life of someone who passed away, celebrating, grieving, hurting. And she said she described this room as a room that was full of alcoholics, some people who had criminal history, some who loved Jesus, some who did not want anything to do with Jesus. And she looked around the room and she could see God in that space. And what she talks about here is the experience of a redeeming, which is a very churchy word, but a word that I would really love to heal for a lot of us who have church hurt. Destabilizing, like, how cool of a word is that? Love of a surprising God. I would challenge you that the surprising element of God there is not that we worship a God who is critical and harsh and judgmental, a God who has very high expectations of us. The surprising nature of God is that God is crazy in love with us. God has a lot of grace for us. God is ever present with us. And to be in a world where we get to tell his story, where we get to tell the story of all the humans in the Bible who discovered this about our God, is a really incredible, it's a huge honor. The Bible should show us that when you look among the broken, the addicts, the criminals, the weary, the abused, the overlooked, the homeless, the poor, the mentally ill, the compassionate, the rejected, the outcasts, you will find God. Friends, I want to challenge you today with this little piece of just my heart. You don't have to have a college degree to be able to tell someone how much God loves them. You don't have to want to pursue any kind of career in preaching to be able to value humankind in the way Jesus did. I see the love of people every single day in our outreach experiences, where people who have needs give away what they've just gotten to love another person. I see it every single day next door in our Family Connection Center, when there is so much tenderness between parents and their kiddos, and these are families that are facing really complicated things. And sometimes it's as simple as a parent telling a really beautiful story and remembering something really important about their child, and you see their child just light up and know, like, I'm important. My challenge to you is that I do not want you to leave this space thinking that you're insignificant, thinking that what you've been through makes you worthless, thinking that God devalues you any less. I know that in my relationship with God, that when I see you through God's eyes, I love every single one of you, and I'm human. Never underestimate the opportunity to share your story with someone who may really, really need it, and it may be the only thing that's going to keep them alive, that's going to inspire them, that's going to help them. Because I promise in that moment, that's God in you, and that's really cool. Alyssa and I are going to end with a song, and I just want you to listen to this song. It's written by an artist named Chris Renzema. We do a lot of his music here. I love how honest and down-to-earth his music is. We don't often do a lot of mainstream worship music around here. We tend to do things that really connect with us in a very deep and personal way. And I love this because it is so human. There's a lot of back and forth in this song, and I just want you to listen, and I hope it connects with you wherever you are struggling today, wherever you are feeling, or whatever you're experiencing today. I hope it brings you some kind of hope.
You say that you love me, don't say that you love me, 'cause I don't know how to be yours. You say that you want me, don't say that you want me, 'cause I don't know how to be yours. I still act like an orphan, I guess, and my heart breaks to confess. But even while you hold me as I cry on the floor, I still don't know how to be yours. Say that you love me, don't say that you love me, 'cause I don't know how to be yours. You say that you want me, don't say that you want me, 'cause I don't know how to be yours. I still act like an orphan, I guess, and my heart breaks to confess. And even while you hold me as I cry on the floor, I still don't know how to be yours. Love me or hate me, I'm not going anywhere. Leave me or take me, you still bear my signature. Know me or not, seen or forgot, I'm not walking out on you. So love me or hate me, I'm not going anywhere. Leave me or take me, you still bear my signature. Know me or not, seen or forgot, I'm not walking out on you. Love me, hate me, not going anywhere. Leave me or take me, still bear my signature. Know me or not, seen or forgot, I'm not walking out on you. I'm not walking out on you. I'm not walking out on you.
All right, friends, we have meals left over, please take those or bring those to someone you know who may need them. We will be here tomorrow for coffee and questions. Monday. I need to sleep. I'll be writing a paper tomorrow. Monday, we will be here at 6:30 for coffee and questions. So join us for that. That's an opportunity to come and we just chat. I bring questions, bring conversations, and we just talk. Nothing is off the table. I know we have Valentine's next week on Wednesday, and I don't know if there's any other announcements, but we also, as we're enjoying the rain and some cooler temperatures, it does ramp back up next week. So outreach will be back on every afternoon that the temperature is 95 or hotter. So if you would like to sign up, if you are in a place to do that, we've got an app. Let me or Scott know if you need to get connected to that. So we love you guys. Thank you for hanging out with us, and